38 Ambush Alley was made in 1987 by Bruce Cohn Productions for the Worlds of Wonder ActionMax. I have covered the system in episode 13. The video you are going to see is recorded from the original VHS tape transmitted to my capture card via YPBPR. As such, the video might be the highest quality version of the footage in the whole internet. Please remember that video on VHS is stored in a S-video-like fashion, but with much more compression using a color under technique. As such, the video quality is not very high. The game takes place at two police training facilities. The player is a cadet training there. The trainer feels much like a drill sergeant. The first facility consists of moving targets with drawings of persons on them. Some of the persons are enemies, others are civilians. The civilians stand in poses that make them look hostile, or they hold items which can be mistaken for weapons. Similarly, the enemies sometimes hide their weapons behind objects. The challenge is to decide fast whether or not to shoot. Some enemies will shoot the player if they aren't shot within a certain time frame. Shooting civilians will result in a score penalty. Sometimes the game shows the targets being shot, which makes sense no matter what the player does, as the cadets operate in pairs. However, it is often hard to realize those shots when actually playing, as the targets just gain a realistic small hole and the game itself is quite action-packed. The second part of the game is rather similar, but utilizes full-size dolls instead of targets. Those dolls are mostly static. Again, enemies are mixed with civilians. Personally, I like the game. Amongst the ActionMax games, it feels the most mature as it is the most realistic one. However, in this game the reusage of already shown footage is the most prominent amongst all ActionMax games. Furthermore, the police trainer is quite brave to walk around inside the facilities without a bulletproof vest, as I would have shot him on many occasions by accident. The cover is held in the same style as the other ActionMax games, showing someone playing the system. The screen shows the second training facility, whereas the screenshots on the back of the packaging show solely the first facility. I was able to do an interview with Ron Brody, the director of the game. In our conversation, I learned that 38 Ambush Alley was the second ever ActionMax game and the first one he did. Bruce Cohn Productions were sent a beta version of Sonic Fury as an example how they should do the game. They were not sent any technical assets by Worlds of Wonders concerning the generation of the flashing circles. Therefore, initially there were slight problems getting the targeting system done.
They had some big problems like with encoding, and I remember that especially on the first one, which was Ambush Alley, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's not coded correctly, not really locked onto the specific targets so well. You know, they had a tremendous deadline on that first one to get it out, and they were still experimenting with how to get this, you know, pulsation working correctly and getting it duplicated, which was also another issue because you'd lose pulse signal and such. So I do recall that, you know, really at the 12th hour of ActionMax being released, they had brought in a huge team of people working on the encoding and in all the computer processing. Because as you can imagine, computers at that time it was 30 years ago, and they were slow as slow can be. I mean, just trying to get these things rendered and put up. I mean, it was a huge process.
The filming locations for 38 Ambush Alley were very exciting.
The first part of Ambush Alley was shot actually at the Los Angeles Police Department training facility. So we shot there, and those targets that are used are the actual targets that were used at that time by the Los Angeles Police Department. So that was striving to be, you know, very, very authentic. Then it goes to the second part, which is kind of in a New York backstreet environment where the police searching, these apartment buildings. That was all shot at Universal Studios in their backlot department, where many major films have been filmed, their New York set.
An incident at Universal Studio forced the team to end filming ahead of schedule.
I do remember that the night that we were shooting that particular sequence in the alley, they had a fire at Universal Studios, not on our set, but the entire studio was evacuated. And so that tremendously ate into our production time for that night because, we couldn't afford to hire the entire crew for the next.
In the mid-80s, companies were afraid of liability, therefore Worlds of Wonders dictated some frame conditions.
When all of those characters pop up and appear in the New York set, those guns are all wooden. And that was dictated by the company because of trying to eliminate any liability.
I was doubting that there were many animatronic puppets at Universal Studios and asked whether some of the dolls were actually humans or dolls manually moved by people.
That's correct. They had masks on and they were costumed as dolls, but all of them were human. There was not one actual robot per se. They were all humans.
Mr. Brody liked working on 38 Ambush Alley.
I think the most interesting was actually Ambush Alley and just being able to go into the real police training facility and to try to make the audience experience what a police officer would experience at the time.
A crew member of the game later became famous in his own right.
One of the interesting things also on Ambush Alley, on a production note, is that the cinematographer, the cameraman, if you look at the credits, is Bertram Van Munster, who is the creator, inventor, and director of The Amazing Race.
Wow. My acknowledgement goes to Mr. Brody. I'm so happy that he took the time and gave me the opportunity to do this interview. He was an important pioneer to FMV gaming and to light gun games. It was a big honor to me speaking to him. This is the end of the review. My name is Ben. I thank you for viewing.